California is one of the states with the highest taxes in all of America. It's also one of the most expensive places to live. If this wasn't bad enough, the Californian government is at never-ending risk of bankruptcy with a brutal amount of debt and a large fiscal deficit. But despite all of this, California is home to the third richest and most prosperous region on the planet. Yes, dear viewers, of course I'm talking about the Santa Clara Valley. What do you say? You've never heard of it? Well, actually, you have, because it's better known by its unofficial name of Silicon Valley. This is the place where companies like Google, Apple, and Facebook were all born. In total, 39 of the 100 biggest companies in the entire world have their headquarters in this place. But make no mistake, Silicon Valley is not a big metropolis like New York City or London. In fact, the opposite is true. Cities like Cupertino, Palo Alto, and Mountain View have little more than 60,000 inhabitants. Menlo Park, where Facebook headquarters are located, has a smaller population than a small town in Kansas. But in this region, the average salary surpasses $10,000 a month, and it's home to many of the world's largest billionaires. And if you're wondering, the answer is no. There is no silicon mine in the Santa Clara Valley whatsoever. In fact, the name Silicon Valley was coined in the 1970s because this is where microchips and semiconductors made out of silicon were manufactured. Don't go looking for any natural resources in this part of the world because you won't find any. So now we come to the real question of why here? I mean, what's so special about this area? Why not Northern California? Or why not New York or Chicago or any other place for that matter? Now, it's easy to understand why somewhere like Switzerland is so rich. They have low taxes and an excellent political system. Then there's Saudi Arabia, and they're rich because they've got oil. The Silicon Valley is very different from those places, and it's very different from other places in America. For one, it's got those high taxes we mentioned, and believe me, the taxes are really, really high.
For example, imagine that you're a top executive and you make $500,000 a year. If you lived in Texas, you would pay around 32% in income tax. However, in California, you would pay 42%. As you can see, the difference is meaningful.
So again, why Silicon Valley and not Texas or Delaware or Nevada? What makes this region quite so special for startup? And even more importantly than that, well, what is a startup and how is one created? Well, in today's video, we're going to answer all of those questions, but before we do, let's have a look back at the history.
The Traitorous Eight.
There are times in history when several coincidences happen all at once, and this is the miracle of Silicon Valley. Our story starts in the year 1956 with a company called Shockley Semiconductor Lab. They were the first company in the valley to manufacture silicon-based microchips. Their offices were in a little village with no more than 7,000 inhabitants. This was a village called Mountain View, located on the outskirts of San Francisco. Back then, nobody talked about Silicon Valley. Of course, the San Francisco Peninsula was one of the tech capitals of America, though. In fact, the radars used by the Army were manufactured by a company that you might have heard of, Hewlett-Packard. Further, Stanford University generated skilled professionals ready to work in rocket science. But let's go back to our friends at Shockley. They were the most advanced company in their field, and perhaps this company could have gone very, very far. But they had a big problem. Apparently, people in the company felt that their boss was a bit of a dick. And so what happens? Well, one day, 8 of the youngest workers in the company went to Mr. Shockley's office and essentially said, "F you, Shockley, you can take your stupid ass company and stick it up your ass. We're the ones who designed your technology. We're the brains of this business. So we're gonna get out of here, start our own business, and kick ass without you." These 8 men became known as the Traitorous Eight. Their average age was only 30. They had no money whatsoever, and they wanted to start a state-of-the-art technology company that required a lot of investment. And you might be thinking now, well, would banks lend the money? And the answer to that is absolutely not. However, pay attention here because this was the beginning of something really, really big. In 1959, the first venture capital funded company, it was born. But hold on a second here because I do want to explain what that actually means.
The value of an idea.
Since the beginning of capitalism, there have been people with money willing to partner with people who had ideas, and together they started companies. Nonetheless, after World War II, lots of soldiers came home from the battlefield, and 1 out of every 2 veterans, they wanted to start companies. This means all of a sudden there was a spike in demand for financing. This is why many of the people with money started rethinking the way that businesses used to work. For instance, there's Lawrence Rockefeller from the famous Rockefeller family. This man had something more than lots of money. He also knew other people who had money. So, essentially, one day in 1959, he called them all up and said, "Listen up, dear chaps, put down your champagne glasses and your caviar for a second, shine your monocle and pay attention, because I just found 8 guys in California who've a great business idea. They're very, very clever and they want to develop some weird stuff with lots of technology. It's got silicon and other things I don't understand. But if you fancy this idea, give me your money and I'll invest it in said business. And if it all goes well, we'll become even richer than we are now. Pip, pip." And so, as it was said, so it was done. This is how, in 1959, the traitorous 8 from Silicon Valley started Fairchild Semiconductors with the money from Rockefeller and his millionaire friends. This was the first time it wasn't just one rich dude investing, but a collective society of rich dudes instead. And this is how the first venture capital fund called Venrock Associated was born. And guess where they have their headquarters? Of course, that's Palo Alto. This was Silicon Valley. Of course, this was a really risky idea, and that's why these funds are called venture capital funds. I mean, if you put your money into a big company like Coca-Cola, you'll lose or win a little bit of money, but it's really hard to go fully bankrupt. Nonetheless, giving money to a guy with nothing but an idea, that's a pretty risky job. So, well, what's the advantage then? Well, of course, it's that if it goes right, you get stupidly rich. And so then we have to answer the question, well, what's the secret of success? Of course, you do want to invest in lots of different companies at the same time. You need just 1 out of 10 to be successful to make it worthwhile. And the truth is that Rockefeller and his other fellas made a hell of an investment. Actually, the company still exists today and has offices all over the world. And so what happens when one person gets stupidly rich by doing something? Well, a lot of copycats spring up out of the blue trying to do the same thing. By the year 1982, there were already 12 VC funds in Silicon Valley. Their philosophy, it was simple. Get private money from investors, pension plans, and of course all those rich dudes, and then a team of specialized professionals meets entrepreneurs and starts looking for good ideas. In summary, Silicon Valley has it all. Clever guys who study at Stanford, clever guys who study somewhere else but eventually emigrate to the Valley, a network of companies that make it easy to start any business, and of course a ton of money. Alright, so this all sounds pretty cool, but what does a Silicon Valley company actually look like? How does this startup system and VC funds actually work? Well, let's have a look, shall we?
The Silicon Valley way.
I know. The word startup has already become another buzzword that stupid people use to sound smarter. So then, well, what is the difference between a normal company and a startup? Well, here's a good definition.
A startup is a company designed to grow fast. Paul Graham, founder of Yahoo Store and a venture capital investor.
Alright, so now I can probably guess what you're thinking. I mean, aren't all companies designed to grow fast? Well, actually, no. Just look at IKEA as a good example.
IKEA is one of the most successful companies of all time, but its main principle since the beginning has been to grow only with its own funds. No debt from banks or hedge funds. This means that unlike other companies, IKEA took a long time to grow, but it was healthy, consistent growth.
So now the question, well, it still remains, what is a startup? Well, Facebook would be a great example here. Why? First of all, because it's a scalable business. This means it doesn't matter if they have 1 or 1 million users. The spending is almost the same. But not only that, Facebook is the perfect example of what we know as the startup financing cycle. And pay attention here, because this is really key in understanding how Silicon Valley works. The first step is what we know as the Valley of Death. Why is it called this? Well, because this is the stage where most projects don't survive. In the case of Facebook, we have our friends Mark Zuckerberg and Eduardo Saverin, who had a great business idea. But an idea by itself has little or no use. You have to execute on it. So these two friends, they put down money out of their own pockets to launch their first prototype, which was thefacebook.com. And, well, you know the rest of the story. Suddenly, all of the students at Harvard University, they had an account. Next stage, well, that was to become a serious company with workers, officers, and, other important stuff like that. And for that important stuff, you need money. And, well, did they have any money? Well, no. So what did they do? Well, they went to Silicon Valley and they met this guy that you see here. His name is Peter Thiel. And listen up here, because this is the first difference between the Valley and the rest of the world. Peter Thiel is what we know as an angel investor. He's a guy with a lot of money, and he's willing to invest in companies that are still in this valley of death. At this moment, 2004, Facebook was an idea with a lot of potential, but almost no profit. Investment, it was so risky that no bank would lend any money to them. So instead, Peter Thiel put $500,000 into Facebook. With this, he was buying 10% of the company. And now you might be wondering, well, why just 10%? At the end of the day, back then, Facebook, it wasn't worth anything. And with so much money invested, Peter Thiel could have demanded a bigger share of the company. And to be fair, that is absolutely true if they were located somewhere like Alabama. So they all began offering competing good conditions to the entrepreneurs. So if he asked for too many shares of the company, Zuckerberg and Saverin would just have gone to somebody else. Don't worry though, everybody, Peter Thiel is still extraordinarily rich. Alright, so you're probably beginning to understand why it's a good idea to start companies here. But hold on a minute, because you ain't seen nothing yet. With $500,000, Facebook's founders could start building something big, something that could be sold to the mass market. Really, this is the moment when a company proves itself successful or not. The moment when they survive the valley of death, or they don't. If Facebook was founded in Alabama, they would have probably stopped here. They had a product, it worked, it earned the money to live on. End of story. But remember, this is a startup, and its goal is to grow as fast as it possibly can. This is where those VC funds came into the picture. We're not talking about a Peter Thiel guy with a lot of money here. We're talking about companies with even more money and a team of advisors. This is important because in many cases, VC funders can make vital decisions in the company and even tell the founders how they have to design their corporate structure, who they can partner with, or even how and when to expand internationally. Alright, so coming back to our Facebook story. In the year 2005, a VC fund called Accel Partners put $12.7 million into Facebook. With this, they owned 13% of the company.
But as an aside, if you remember, Peter Thiel bought 10% of Facebook with $500,000. Nonetheless, Accel Partners subsequently paid $12.7 million for 13% of the company. If you do the math, you see that from one day to the next, Facebook is now valued at $98 million. In other words, in just 1 year, Peter Thiel's investment increased by 2,000%.
Pretty impressive, right? But again, hold on, because you still haven't seen anything yet. This Accel Partners investment is what we call a Series A investment. And if there's a Series A, it's because later we have a Series B and a Series C. Alright, so in the case of Facebook, the Series C funding was Microsoft, who paid $240 million in 2007. And for this $240 million, they were getting just 1.6% of Facebook. So let's return to our maths, because it's pretty mind-blowing. Facebook is now valued at $15 billion. This means that 10% that Peter Thiel bought for $500,000 is now worth 300% more.
Damn.
Alright, so this means that if you regular viewer had invested just $100 in Facebook in the year 2004, you'd now have enough money to buy a waterfront house with a swimming pool and a mini golf course. Alright, so hold on a moment, because at this point you might be wondering, well, hold on a second, Simon, was Facebook actually worth $15 billion at that moment? Did they really make enough money to justify that crazy $240 million investment? Well, no. But you see, by investing all that money, you get lots and lots of things. Things that sooner or later will end up making you a profit. And this is when we get to the final stage of a startup. Do we sell it to a big company or do we go public? Facebook, they decided to enter the stock market, but many other startups will simply be sold to big multinational companies.
Apple buying Shazam in $400 million.
And yes, I know what you are going to tell me. Alright, Simon, this sounds really, really good, but I just don't believe it's that easy. And, well, you'd be absolutely right, because 9 out of 10 startups fail. But, importantly, you just need one to succeed to make a lot of people crazy rich. This is why the goal of so many politicians now is to make their own Silicon Valley.
Why Berlin's Silicon Alley is Europe's new Silicon Valley. Guadalajara, the Mexican Silicon Valley. Africa's new Silicon Valleys.
Yep, everybody wants to have their own Silicon Valley in their own backyard. Well, everybody except for those people who actually live in Silicon Valley.
The tech elite are abandoning Silicon Valley in droves.
But that is something we're going to actually talk about in our next video. Meanwhile, the big question is this. Do you think we can replicate the Silicon Valley model in other countries? Well, please do leave your answer in the comments section below. Also, don't forget to check out ReconsiderMedia.com. They're the podcast that provided the vocals in this episode that were not mine. And remember, we publish brand new videos every week, so subscribe and hit that bell button so you won't miss any posts. And if you like this video, give us a thumbs up. And as always, I'll see you next time.
And if you want to learn more about politics and hear more of my lovely voice, don't forget to check out the Reconsider podcast at ReconsiderMedia.com. Reconsider is a podcast that challenges you to reconsider your views by providing context, but we don't do the thinking for you.